Hey noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and today I found something good, I hope. So what we've got here is the channel History Hit, and the title of this seems really interesting. It's called Historian Reviews the Best and Worst Depictions of the Roman Empire in Film and TV. Now, I'll admit that it's a little bit of a guilty pleasure of mine to completely destroy those movies that look inaccurate as hell. But at the same time, occasionally it's nice to have a little mix and maybe see, oh look, they did the armor right for once. So I really like the approach. I just hope that this is not one of those historians that pushes politics, and instead it's an historian that actually speaks about, you know, history. Metatron, outlandish request, how dare you. Let's jump into it.
Flaming Balls, Flaming Balls of Fury. It's been some time since I've watched this movie for good reason, because I don't really enjoy it. Sadly, the full and complete biography of the life and times and achievements of Bigger Stickers have not survived for us today. It is just a shame that much of the rest of this film is utter garbage.
I like him. He's good. Yep. I like your style, mate. I like your style. Real goth sack Rome. I don't know what that means, but yeah, he's good.
Hello, my name is Tristan Hughes. I'm the host of the Ancients podcast, and I do lots of ancient history stuff at History Hit. Now, the team have brought me in here after the great success of the Gladiator Deep Dive and the Alexander Deep Dive. Make sure you also go and check those out.
Oh, I will. I will.
A wide array of Roman movies, and also I hear a few. So I thought, yeah, why not? No doubt there'll be some clips that they've chosen that I will not enjoy, but there'll be others that I really will. So hey, it's going to be fun, it's going to be entertaining, and let's get going.
Let's go. Let's go. Rome. Just so you know, number ones, I might need to jump cut this a little more. I don't know how they do it, to be honest, if they have special permissions, but when it comes to me, every time I do reaction videos and then they show too much clips that are longer than 10 seconds about any movie or TV series, my video always gets copyright claimed. So in order to avoid that, you will notice that I'll do jump cuts. So I still suggest you to, for the complete experience, to go and check out the original video, and I will of course put a link in the description below. When it comes to me, I just have to do it. I'll just have to jump cut the clips abnormally, is what it is.
HBO series that I've gone on Twitter and classicists everywhere love, and ancient historians love. It is brilliant.
Yeah, I love that you see the brass helmets and the lorica hamatas, or the mail. The thing with the whistle, I'm interested to see what he's going to say about that.
So this is depicting Julius Caesar's conquest of Gaul. I think it's about 52 BC that this battle scene is depicted. First off, armour, brilliant. Chainmail armour, no lorica segmentata in sight.
Good.
The iron armour you think sometimes of Roman legionaries from like Gladiator and so on, the banded iron armour. That's introduced later.
Yeah.
Not in the late Republican period in the time of Julius Caesar.
Exactly.
The whistle. Let's talk about the whistle.
Please.
I think this is something that many of us always remember when we watch this part of HBO Rome season 1, right at the beginning, episode 1, and it is suggesting the use of whistles to move soldiers from the front ranks to further back. There's no evidence for the use of whistles by the Romans in battles like this. However, there is archaeological evidence for whistles.
Exactly. Of course, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. Fantastic. The idea is, as he's saying, it's speculative. It is possible that that's how they used it, but it is a speculative interpretation of the remains that he's going to mention now, in the sense that some whistles were in fact found in military context within the material goods. But of course, simply because whistles were found, it doesn't mean that they had any military application. Once again, it is speculative. Interesting, but speculative.
There's an example of a whistle found at the Roman fort of Regensburg, and it's extraordinary little whistle. Ben Kane, brilliant Dr. Ben Kane, he showed me a replica that he has. But he explained to me how we don't know the function of it, and it may well have been, was it used in battle? Could have been, but more likely for a doggy, for a pet dog. So there is no direct evidence for the use of whistles in battle.
And also the idea that it could have just been a personal thing. I mean, there are a multitude of reasons even today that one may own a whistle. As you said, one is the dog. Maybe it was just recreational. Perhaps it was something that he bought for a kid of his. Who knows?
What I like about it here is that, look, there is still archaeological evidence for whistles in a military context in Roman forts, and it's being used here. And what I think it is really demonstrating is the discipline of these Roman legionaries. They are some of the greatest, most battle-hardened soldiers in the Roman Republic at this time.
Those, of course, are the officers, the ones that you see with the horizontal crest. That's symbolizes centurions, commanding officers. Very good.
Legionary Titus Pullo is a hero of the 13th Legion. He has committed a terrible sacrilege, and he will pay.
I think, of course, now it's showing the extreme discipline that sometimes Roman forces were subject to. The idea of, for example, decimation, which only occurred a few times. It was something that happened in the olden times, and then it was brought back up to a certain extent in a way that was in fact frowned upon. But yeah, it did happen, but it didn't happen constantly. Here you've got like some kind of, I think it's called flagelling with the English term. But one thing I want to say about the equipment, he did say correctly that the army, they look very believable in the way they are dressed. I think one thing that I would have done differently is that they do still have that feeling of a uniform, in the sense that they all literally have the exact same helmet typology. At least with the helmets, and even when it comes to certain manufacture of the way the shields were painted and decorated, maybe a little more variety would have made it more reasonable.
As will any man here who breaks the law.
Public disciplinary actions was something that the Romans were keen on.
Is that a leather bracelet? I hate leather bracelets! I hate leather bracelets. Is it a leather bracelet? I hope not. Maybe I'm just seeing things.
To make sure that soldiers didn't do similar, basically kind of install a bit of fear there. This is an example of a whipping, but we know of several cases, I think there's at least 4 cases of actions that if a Roman soldier was found guilty of, would result in execution. Beheadings, they could be crucifixions in cases, horrific. There's, for instance, the story of if a soldier fell asleep whilst on guard during the night. If they fell asleep and were caught and they were found guilty of it, they could be subject to a gruesome death called fusterarium. Now this was when the soldiers' tent companions, so legionaries were divided into contuberniums, which was a kind of a dormitory of 8 men. And those people who you shared your dormitory with, they'd be like kind of your closest, your brothers in arms on campaigns and so on. And these closest comrades, they would have to step forward and you would be beaten to death.
I'd like to underline the contubernium, as he's mentioning, is the smallest unit within the Roman army and military machine. And so, as he's saying, these are because, of course, you have the century that would be 100 men, but that's 80 fighting men and 20 slaves. This means that if you divide it by 10, these numbers will change depending on the period, by the way, but generally speaking, if you divide it by 10, of course, you will have 10 subunits or contubernia, which would have 8 fighting men, 2 slaves per unit. And these would be very, very close, just to give a little context to that.
By them, either with sticks or your or their bare hands or something like that, and it's pretty brutal stuff.
Yeah.
So for a select number of crimes, the punishment in the Roman army was death and public execution.
I think it's interesting to also keep in mind that at the end of the day, the reason why the discipline was and the punishments were so harsh is because of what I think the Roman generals, the legati and consuls, were trying to achieve with their discipline is that, as he said, they would instill fear in their men, in the sense that a Roman soldier may have ended up, and this is mind-blowing, may have ended up fearing his commanding officers more than the enemy in battle. Because at least when you're fighting against the enemy in battle, well, if you fight well and your unit works well, and in general the Roman army tends to be very, very successful, then yeah, you could be killed. But then again, you can defend yourself, you've got your mates, your other soldiers that are fighting with you. So your chances, your likelihood of survival is astronomically higher than compared to if you piss off your commander or your general, and if you commit one of those crimes, then they will condemn you to death. It's not like you can fight. It's not like you could try and prevent it. So that is why, if we put this in perspective, a Roman soldier would have been more afraid of his commanding officers and the general than his enemies and the battle front. Can you imagine that?
To ensure that other soldiers didn't do similar. I mean, what better way to stop them from doing that than saying your penalty would be an absolutely gruesome and public death.
Deserters will be crucified.
Now, when it comes to crucifixion, I have a dedicated video, but remember that generally speaking, crucifixion is reserved for non-citizens. So you may ask, well, hold on a minute, if only non-citizens could be crucified, but aren't professional Roman soldiers exclusively citizens? They are, but then again, when you become a soldier and you do the ceremony of your swearing to become a soldier, you also renounce your rights as a citizen, in the sense that then you can be punished within the Roman army in ways that a regular Roman citizen couldn't be by the state. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much. Interesting to see the closing mechanism there.
Before you, Vercingetorix, son of Celtil.
That was
Leather bracelet.
Vercingetorix, the leader of the Great Gallic Revolt against the Romans, culminates in the Great Siege of Alesia, where Caesar wins one of his greatest victories, I think you could say.
My subscribers have been asking me to make a dedicated video forever. I will. I'll do it. I'll do it.
Against Vercingetorix and his host within Alesia, and then a massive liberating force that Caesar, Mark Antony and the soldiers are able to fend off too. And it ultimately results in Vercingetorix going to Caesar's camp and surrendering, according to one version. The version I think they followed here is of Vercingetorix going to Caesar's camp voluntarily, and that is mentioned in a historian called Cassius Dio, who's writing a couple of centuries later. But he mentions
I didn't know you say Cassius Dio in English. I always say Cassius Dio. First time I hear that.
how it comes completely out of the blue, and everyone's quite shocked when they see Vercingetorix very tall in all of his armour. You see him walking through the camp and going to the feet of Caesar in the centre of the camp, the Praetorium. The other account, written by Caesar himself, and Caesar was a master of PR, so we also have to take that with a pinch of salt, was that Vercingetorix was handed over to Julius Caesar.
And of course, when he says he's a master of PR, clearly speaking about political propaganda. De Bello Gallico itself is anti-senatorial. So, I mean, it is what it is.
And this is the thing, down in his armour, throws it off at Julius Caesar's feet. He kneels and he doesn't say a word. He kisses the statue, but it's obviously an act of humiliation. Kissing the eagle, the standard of
symbol
Rome,
of the legion.
Rome's superiority, Rome being the victor. And perhaps Vercingetorix expecting some clemency or some mercy from Caesar, which Caesar has no intention. That's not mentioned in the surviving sources, but it's an interesting addition of offering.
Very good, excellent commentator so far. I really like his how he's mentioning the sources. This is something that I enjoy doing myself, and oftentimes I see missing when you have these interjection and commentary. It's the idea of oftentimes they miss the sources. He's providing all of the sources and telling us about it and kind of going deeper into it. So I really like him so far. Excellent commentator. One thing that I noticed, and again, beautiful shots from Rome, HBO Rome, but I have to say I did see a couple of full leather armor suits that, yeah, I mean, the costume department, I think you're being too nice, mate. But then again, maybe it's just me being too pedantic. I don't know. There is that too. I'm willing to accept that. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much.
And speaking of said triumph, here we go. Death of the King of the Gauls. 46 BC now. So between that scene of Vercingetorix surrendering and Caesar in Gaul, it's been about 6 or so years, during which Julius Caesar has successfully fought and won, the majority of his civil war, beating Pompey, then against
Pompey?
victories in Egypt, against the Ptolemies, I think it's Ptolemy the 13th and his faction, and Arsinoe the 4th, then goes north, defeats a powerful king in what is today Turkey, the Pontic War, Pharnaces, and then he goes to North Africa, defeats the likes of Cato the Younger and Metellus, at Thapsus and Utica. So he's won all of these successes in the past few years against Romans, but also against powerful local dynasts too, each place that he's gone. And finally in 46 BC, he's back in Rome, And he has not had the time to have the great triumph, which was kind of the mark of a great success of a military general, where they would go through the city,
Absolutely.
Through a particular route, end at the Capitoline Hill.
Triumph, like he's saying, and then another thing would be, of course, the triumphant columns that oftentimes some of the generals and some of the emperors would erect as a permanent marker. We could say that in a way their triumph is twofold. One is the actual dynamic one, which is the one we're seeing here and he's talking about, and the other one is the eternal one, which is set in stone.
Julius Caesar, he's won all of these victories, all of these campaigns, and he decides, I'm not going to hold one triumph. I'm going to hold four. I'm going to celebrate each of my different successes in different areas of the world. And the first of them is his Gallic triumph, celebrating his conquest of Gaul. And that is what is being depicted here. So you have Roman soldiers in Rome itself. This was the only time that Roman soldiers were allowed to be in Rome before, of course, the establishment of the Castra Praetoria and the Praetorian Guard in Rome.
One thing before he continues that often you will notice in all of these productions, whether it be the newest Netflix ones or whether it be sometimes the oldies, is that you will notice that the cavalry, I don't know if it's the case in this shot, but oftentimes cavalry and cavalrymen will be using stirrups, and that is absolutely anachronistic. It shouldn't be the case at all. But the reason why I kind of stopped mentioning it, even though it happens virtually on every single movie, is because apparently I was told that it's a production requirement when it comes to actors' health insurance. So it's something that just these productions, they can't not do. Unfortunately, I would say, but then again, I mean, I don't want an actor to have an accident because I want historical accuracy. I mean, maybe something could be done with computer graphics, but then again, I don't know, I'm not an animator. But it is a thing. So if you do see stirrups, if he doesn't complain about it, most likely it's because he knows, like I've been told, it just is a requirement of these production companies and sets. Look at his armor. Look at that mantle.
That is the young Gaius Octavian, who will become later the Emperor Augustus. And we do know that Julius Caesar around this time does appoint the young Octavian, who was about this time, I think he's about 15, he's a teenager, into the College of Priests.
Glad he's mentioning that, because the connection of religion and not only Julius Caesar himself, Julius Caesar, but even more so Octavianus, is monumental. And that was one of the items of disagreement that I had with, for example, Professor Aldrete. If you have watched my video dedicated to religion and specifically Christianity in comparison to polytheistic traditions of ancient Rome that I've recently made, was one of my reactions to Lex Friedman's podcast. And he very much undermined the importance of religion, particularly for these two specific historical characters, the appointing of Pontifex Maximus and all of these, so the highest chief that eventually Octavian will have, the idea of becoming gods, the divine nature of the emperor, all of these things are enormous driving forces in this period of time. Therefore, I'm glad he's mentioning it. I want to see how he describes religion in ancient Rome in connection to political power. That is an aspect that I would like to have covered correctly.
It's an important role, and Caesar certainly seems to have taken a liking to the young Octavian. He will take him to Spain when he has to go and campaign in Spain after this, and he will name him not only as his primary beneficiary in his will, the first person in his will,
pretty much an heir.
Also, he will adopt him as his son.
Yep. And Octavianus will use that after the idea of Julius Caesar becoming a god. Look at that lorica musculata. Note how decorated the cuirass is. That is one of the distinctions between Roman lorica musculata, one breastplate, one backplate combination armor that only really the most wealthy officers and in general members of the Senate, consuls, legates could afford. At least the complete one, because there is a short version and a long version. The short version occasionally is seen in lower end offices, but the complete one, either made of bronze or made of iron, would have been something that only someone like him could afford, or very, very successful, wealthy statesmen. Regardless, you will notice that the Greek version just has the muscles, sometimes just a little bit, but the Roman version is extremely decorated, and oftentimes these decorations represent critical events in that specific emperor's life, or in this case general's life. So the decorative element of it is what makes them inherently Roman. Another thing I want you to notice from this shot, let me go back very quickly. I know it's a little blurry, but I want you to focus on the color of the tunic that this Roman soldier is wearing. Now remember, these are very important moments and important celebratory moments, triumphant ceremonies, and during these ceremonies we are told that Roman legionaries tended to wear their bleached tunics. So the Roman army during a triumphant celebration tended to be wearing these very white tunics, so it's nice to see. And the idea of Roman legionaries instead wearing red is more of their battle color, if you will. Even though sometimes in iconography, particularly when it comes to, for example, a fresco at Pompeii, we see both. Then again, we will see 2 legionaries in white and 1 legionary in red. So it's very possible that within the city, in urban situations, or obviously triumphant situations, the Roman legion would have been wearing white, then red during battle, representing them as the sons of Mars, and then undyed or naturally colored linen tunics for everyday camp life. Temples seem to be in color. That's another good thing.
The red face paint is mentioned once in Roman sources from what I can remember, and it's apparently kind of associated with the Roman chief god Jupiter, who had a red-faced statue. There is no mention of the red face being used in Caesar's Gallic triumph. However, you can understand why they did it, because hey, it's great, and it is associated with triumph, so maybe it was used in...
A little bit of speculative elements is fine, particularly when they're backed to at least one possible interpretation of the sources. I wish the columns on the left would have been in full color, but then again they do look painted at least, so I do appreciate that. The Last Legion, 2007, nice.
1/3 of all Italy.
There are a lot of problems with this film, and
I want to see if he's going to pick up on the usage of the word Italy, which, by the way, is a non-issue. I'll defend that in a second.
it's certainly not one of my favourites. I think it's pretty dire. But we'll try and find some, not going to hate and hate and hate, I want to find some good points. It's a really interesting time in history. The context, it's the fall of the Western Roman Empire. It's 476 AD. So this is real late antiquity. And Odoacer deposing the last Roman emperor in the West. Or so supposedly there was actually another emperor at that time. But it's the fall of the Western Roman Empire. And it is really, really interesting that there is a film dedicated to it. It is just a shame that much of the rest of this film is utter garbage.
Yeah. Okay, so he didn't pick up on that, so I kind of want to expand on it a little bit. And also, I see more bracelets everywhere. Bracelets. Now, one thing that I notice a lot of people say in the comments, particularly when either a movie that I'm watching set in ancient Rome says or uses the word Italy, or if I myself use the word Italy, then people usually complain by saying, oh, Italy wasn't a thing, it didn't exist, Italy was only created, blah, 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 with Garibaldi, so there was no Italy, you shouldn't say Italy, don't you even know that Italy isn't a thing? Here's the thing. The statement is extremely ignorant when this happens, and I want to pick up on that. The simple fact that Odoacer, in this case, is using the word Italy is fine. It's absolutely fine. Because, of course, what language would he have been speaking in that instance? Obviously not English. To imagine that he is using Latin. And in Latin, the word Italia, which is pretty much the same word that we still use in Italian to call our country, Italia, absolutely existed. And not only it existed in the late empire, during the fall of the Western Roman Empire, but it existed during the early empire, during the Principate, during the Dominate, during the Republic, during the early Republic. The word is ancient. And even though, of course, it didn't have the same geopolitical definition or meaning as the modern way we use the word Italy or Italia, it did exist, and it only had a geographic meaning. Now, the meaning of that geographic connotation changes and varies depending on the period. In the initial period, Italia was pretty much just the center of Italy. Then the meaning of the word expands as the Roman Republic annexes more and more territory. It will include the north, it will include the south, and by the Roman Empire, when you say Italia, you are also including the islands. So if you're a Sicilian, you are from Italia, and if you're a Sardinian, you are still from Italia, and you have been since since the Roman Empire, which, as a Sicilian myself, is really nice as a way to also counter those people that ignorantly say, but you're not really Italian then, you're not really from Italy, you're from Sicily. Sicily has been part of Italy since the Roman Empire. Thank you. Their helmets look a little too early to be used in this period. This guy in the front was okay.
Romulus Augustus wasn't really prepared to be emperor. His dad kind of took over as a chief commander and then installed his young son as emperor like a year before he is then deposed. This is like 475 AD. It all happens really, really quickly. And yeah, it is quite interesting. He then gets the name Augustulus added to his name. Originally his name is just Romulus. And Augustus is added when he becomes emperor.
Okay, so we are pretty much halfway through. I did the first 15 minutes, and this is a very long episode, so I really like it so far. I like him. He's really good. Really, one of my favorite commentators so far. But I think that considering the fact that I've added quite a bit as well myself, this is probably already extremely long. So I'm going to turn it into a series, just like I did with Lex Fridman. So we're not only going to continue this, maybe make another episode to conclude this first section, see what other movies he's reviewing. But if you like this, we will see other episodes that they have made on this channel. And as always, go check the original video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channels that I am replying to, because of course I very much appreciate their work and all the work that goes into editing, scripting, and of course his contribution. All right, number ones, well, very pleasantly surprised. We've got something really interesting. I see that he has also broken down Gladiator. That's going to be good. I wonder if he's going to talk about Gladiator too. And we also have a few other experts in here that we can choose from. So absolutely let me know if there is any episode that you think I should totally make a video reaction to. And as always, thank you so much for watching. If you're not yet a member of this community, become a number one. Subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.